Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, on this sunny, lightly brisk day in Southern California. Today's episode is called The Pendulum of Belief. And I am not looking forward to making that thumbnail on YouTube. I tried to boil it down. I thought, man, that's just the perfect title. And it just came to me about 5 seconds ago. Wasn't 5 minutes. I was going to review Westworld when I was setting up the equipment. And I don't really feel like fumbling through my phone to make sure I get actors and directors and writers and all that stuff correct. I'm going to do it. It'll be for those of you who've already seen it, not for those of you who want to see it. But the pendulum of belief, what is that? Well, it's really interesting to listen to people. When you listen to people, you start to hear what they believe. And you start to realize that the world is full of incredible oxymorons, incredible contradictions, and it's really okay in some cases. But I always fear that once we create a mechanism of double talk, double speak, of cognitive dissonance inside our minds, then anything is possible. And if that's the case, if that is true and not just a suspicion of mine, then to fix society, we have to start calling this stuff out. And we're going to have to call it out in a way that everyone's okay. And there may not be a single language, a single sentence of which we can speak that won't anger people. So let me give you some examples. You all are going to know someone who's a bit like the examples I'm going to give. These are probably in most cases examples of people I know in my real life. And I need you to understand that even though I differ with their opinions, there's no judgment on the quality of their human nature, right? I got lots of buddies, right? A lot of dudes I smoke with, hang out with, and they, about probably 2/3 of them know my previous pursuits in all things conspiracy. I think that very few of them realize that I've sort of moved away from the darkness and started getting into this show, which is all about obviously rebuilding society. But I have a friend who needs to believe everything that he's told by our government. He's a former military guy. And for him, I believe that he has a heart of gold. I think he is one of the most just upstanding guys on planet Earth. Probably just as flawed as anyone, but he's an all-around great guy. I'm not saying this just in case he hears me saying this. I want you to know that that's how I feel about this guy before I talk about the contradiction, the pendulum of belief in his mind. Anytime I've ever brought up anything that contradicts the safety propaganda, the safety net, and the concept of the United States government, especially programs like NASA, organizations like Jet Propulsion's Laboratory. In his mind, he needs that to be true. He wants that to be true. And, sometimes we anthropomorphize things to be substitutes for things we didn't have in our own lives, right? If, when we grow up, we don't have an identity when we're really tiny. And so when we grow up, we mother goose our mothers, our fathers, our uncles, our aunts, our friends, whatever. And then hopefully at some point you gain your own identity and you gain your own strength, which means you have a lattice of reality that sticks into the ground like a ground wire. And this is made of your beliefs and your understandings of society. Hopefully you have the intelligence to let in things that are true, forbid things that are false, and thus you have a truth structure inside you that predicts the future. That's the only thing that's valuable with your knowledge base, is that what you know predicts the future, and then you have truth. Isn't it weird that time doesn't exist yet? When you analyze something in the now, the human mind says, I don't really know if what I'm looking at is what I think I'm looking at. I need time for it to prove to itself to me that it is what I think it is. For instance, if you were sitting in a room really late at night and you thought you saw a ghost, you see some apparition, but it's frozen in the now. It's frozen. You don't have any ability to give it dimension in your mind until you sort of move your head and realize it's in the center of the room. Oh, no, it's a reflection off the mirror. Oh, no, it's the light. I did replace that bulb in the back yard, and it's shining through the kitchen, through that plant, and now it's there, and I thought it was hovering because I don't have my glasses on. It's hitting the mirror, right? But it takes time to gather information about something to determine whether or not it's true or false. Crazy, right? But my friend, when I mention anything about the proof that I believe I have that's unequivocal about the moon missions being faked, he shuts down. He absolutely shuts down. And he tries to shut it down from some sort of faux plateau of authority. But when he and I talk, he knows very quickly that his knowledge of science and my knowledge of science are in a totally different category of life. What I have done with my life is uber technical and multiple disciplines. He stuck to his guns. Not terribly technical. Right? Not dumb. By no means. This guy's brilliant in what he does. Just an all-around sweet guy. Now, for him, the interesting thing is you might say, well, if someone could believe in NASA being a reputable organization and JPL being a reputable organization, them not selling us pictures and robbing us of trillions of dollars that then they filter into black projects, you would assume that someone like that would be very scientific, require a lot of evidence for things, because that's what they believe they see when they look at all the pictures and, you get me. But the funny thing is this. He will look at me and try to be condescending, but he really knows he can't. But then he goes off and talks about conspiracies that he definitely has fun with them, but you can tell he's really thought them through and really tried to decide whether or not they really happened or not. And you can also tell, in my belief, that he believes some of them. And they go like this. UFOs, UFOs, UFOs. Pyramids on the moon. Secret bases on the dark side of the moon. What's interesting is that we sort of pick our poison. Now, we all have different preferences of what we find to be interesting and not interesting, and so this could just simply be lending itself to those algorithms of interest, right? When he, in my opinion, when he contemplates Mother Goose, which is these organizations, whether it be the United States government, which I think is under huge repair right now, all right? I think our intelligence agencies are potentially rebuilding themselves. They just don't want to admit to the public that that's what's going on. So a lot of my criticism in previous episodes may not be warranted anymore. But now what if a new president came in and was debriefed, or briefed I should say, that the space organizations are merely all crap and not producing anything and stealing money? Now you have two choices at this point. You get on Twitter, you get on YouTube, you get on the television, you say citizens of America and of the world, these two organizations, NASA and JPL, although staffed 99% with real people that think they're really doing things, the 1% that orchestrates them at the top of the pyramid within their own organization has them completely duped. We're not on Mars. We've never been to the moon. I am defunding it. You really think that's going to happen? So what might a president do if they can't tell the world that these organizations are corrupt? They would simply quietly defund it. But the problem with that is, now that guy or girl who's president looks horrible. You're defunding the space program. And inside they're going, yeah, because they're a bunch of liars. And if you only knew, you put them all in handcuffs. Not the good employees that think they're doing something good for society, but the ones that are manipulating those within the organization who are like that. The reason why I'm making this episode is to call out the fact that we have folks that have this pendulum of belief, where in one realm they need fact and proof and all this other stuff, and then their same system, the same brain, can swing completely across a cavern of potential beliefs and find it completely safe to be in a sort of complementary world of fiction where there's no proof necessary. And my fear is that we'll never get a grasp of where we are and what we are if we don't sort of get the pendulum to rest in the center, more often than not, and use swings as a matter of entertainment, right? If you're in the center and you're like, we have a nice balanced known and unknown world of where, what we think we understand and what we don't think we understand, but I buy a ticket to Avatar 8 and I have my mind blown by a bunch of special effects and a great story, hopefully. The idea is we know what we're doing. We are entertaining ourselves with those venues. I've always found Christianity very interesting because I think that, again, as I've said several times in several episodes, I really believe it's all about the grown-up Santa Claus for adults who don't want to grow up. And I think that, honestly, if you do no harm, I don't give a crap what you believe. It's hard to believe in evil things and not do any harm. It is. So there's sort of a balance. Believe in fictitious, positive things, and you can be positive in the real world. But isn't it interesting that someone would say that they'll argue with you about the moon missions being fake or real? And let's just say that they're ones that need to believe, or just believe for whatever reason. They haven't researched it much. I like chewing on the moon mission because there's a lot of scientific contradictions, and I'll try to put out the moon episode before this, the new evidence episode. But the story of Christ is very interesting. Now, as I've said in several shows, but I'll repeat here since it's been a while and you probably haven't seen those shows in a long time, I believe that the most valuable lessons within the Holy Bible, as it is portrayed around the world, are the actual words of this character Christ, which used to be printed in red ink. You take all the context away if you just simply read what he has said, and you make up your own mind as to what you think he was talking about. Now, I don't think he ever existed, but someone wrote those words down, and someone derived those words from the universe. And what do I mean by that? Well, when I write a film, I am pulling it out of the universe. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's very simple. When you write a film, when I write a film, I've already seen the film in various areas. Like I've seen the trailer of my idea in the universe. It's like I'm looking over into a theater. And the thing that I do is I sneak in the back of the theater for every single scene, and I write it down. I write down as much as I possibly can, and then I start connecting dots, and I try to push back in and see the stuff I can't see. And then eventually I've got to put the frog DNA in, as they said in Jurassic Park, the missing DNA, to stitch it all together, to structure it, to arrange it, to give it its flow, its beat, all that stuff, right? Okay. Now, I believe that the Bible is written from, a little bit of fact, but more, probably 90% fiction. And it could be what they call typology, which is fiction based on fact. Right, there's a tremendous amount of evidence that Jesus Christ's story was written by the Flavius family based on Titus Flavius's life. There's like 40 plus correlations between the two. Titus Flavius is documented in stone completely, and Jesus Christ's story is not documented at all. Besides, obviously, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which don't have to be as old as they said they were. So this is the part I find fascinating. Someone who will get into the moon missions, really get into the science, will buy all the books about it, memorize, regurgitate, never correlate, never cross-reference, because you can't. The second you do that, you realize we didn't go. But they're good memorizers and repeaters. But then you talk about their Savior. Now, their Savior walked on water, healed every single disease known to man that was around in the Mediterranean at the time, You know, he cast out demons out of humans into pigs, and they went and drowned themselves. He quieted storms. I mean, the stories are awesome. My God. He would have been the coolest guy on planet, whatever. But in the end, he supposedly died for our sins, rose on the third day, ascended to heaven. I mean, obviously he did millions of other things, brought back people back to life. But what I find is interesting is that obviously in this realm, we don't see anything like that whatsoever. No indication of magic on any level. And what's interesting is the people who believe they have evidence of things and need evidence for all things because they're sort of official story junkies, when it comes to their religion, their core substrate of belief, for those that want to really profess the literal translation of his deeds, they don't need any proof at all. And that's called faith. And faith in many forms is the most beautiful thing on earth. And I'm really not mentioning any of this to criticize it. I'm not trying to pass judgment on this pendulum of belief. I'm just bringing it to your attention that isn't it interesting that we have individuals that seem to contradict themselves as to what they need in terms of information to state it to you as a belief. On one realm, they need all the evidence in the world. In the other realm, they can believe in absolute magic. But now let's take a 60,000 foot view on the whole thing. We do this to ourselves. Before we ever had any gigantic government bodies that would sit in a room and claim to run the world, which is fucking hilarious. Let's just pull back for 1 second here. First step into our new altitude, let's put it that way. You got the United Nations, for fuck's sake. The Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and then a shit ton of secret societies like Club 300, Club Rome, and dozens and dozens more. Bilderberg Group, all these guys. They are just a tiny smidgen of the Earth's population, and I mean, if you had a television that was 80 inches, and I said I'm gonna light every single LED or OLED in your television that represents the people who believe they run the world, one single pixel of light would be 1,000,000 times too big because you couldn't see them. That's how tiny the group of people who think they run your world are. And the only thing that gives them any power whatsoever is us. And it's all up here in our brains, people. We believe we have national debt. There couldn't be a bigger fucking scam than national debt. It's all in your head, man. It's all in your head. I'm the alien visiting you from another world, telling you it's all in your head. You are a prisoner of perception. But now let's think about it. How do you allow that to happen? How do you allow these perceptions of debt to exist? How do you worship the Bible or any religion whatsoever that claims even a modicum of equality between beings, between species, or between sexes and genders, and between just same gender, every man's created equal and that sort of thing? How do you believe that? And yet believe that someone has power over you. Now you might say, well, hey man, we need like some rules, man, because if we don't have cops that can stop you for drunk driving checkpoints like fucking Nazi Gestapos. I mean, I love our police, but whoever's got that program started is the guilty party. These guys just need to collect their paycheck and not get fired, right? Believe me, I don't know how much they want to do it. It's because we have this double-think mechanism in our minds, this pendulum of belief that happens to infect almost every single person, where we don't have one unified evaluation process for information. We've got two. And one is one that we grab from our childhood, and one is that we developed serendipitously as adults. Probably serendipitously as a child, but A lot of parents shove their kids into churches. And for the child to have an identity and a sense of purpose, they have to comply. I mean, think about group think to a child. They're put into an institution. I mean, any institution. Could be David Koresh's crazy place, right? I don't believe he was as horrible as they said he was, but it's just me. I wasn't there, but Janet Reno's a little warmer right now. I can guarantee you that. But a child is trying to be accepted by the tribe because we have genetic triggers that say that if we're not accepted, we die. Because we're young and we don't know how to hunt and we don't know how to feed, make our own meals. We don't know how to build shelters and water wells and all that. And so we comply. And once we comply, once we accept a paradigm in our mind for any reason whatsoever, whether it be a survival mechanism mentally, spiritually, or physically, it encodes us. Now, I've talked to enough of you guys, personally, that I know that there's some of you out there that were abused as kids. I know some of you have lived ideal, amazing lives. Now, for those of you who benefit from a wonderful life, you know that you've had a good life. I had a great life. Even though my parents divorced when I was young, I could give a shit, dude. I was on my own time, doing my own thing. For those of you who were abused, you know that you suffered your whole life until you owned your life, until you said, no more will the past equal my present or my future. And you take charge. But some of you still carry scars no matter what. And we all have some scars, most likely from our past. Some of it makes us an interesting person. But the reason why I mention this is that I want to get at the root of how we have these contradicting belief systems, these two systems that seem to come from two totally different universes. One that's obsessed with absolutes, facts, as the mass media, fake news, and shitty, bookstores push at you. Not everything's, fake, but, buy a book on math, that's real. Buy a book on how we went to the moon, that's fake. Sorry, guys. Really sorry. Noble effort. You're seeing something amazing. It's called the moon hoax. But over here in religion, almost any religion, you have fiction trying to shape and mold a society because before that fiction existed, society was law of the jungle. Whoever had the biggest stick got the most ladies. All the kids looked like him. Now let me ask you this. I've been saying for quite a while now, we're on this show we're trying to rebuild the bottom of the pyramid. You're probably nauseated from me hearing me say that. It occurred to me the other day that maybe I shouldn't push the idea of a pyramid at all. Because for me to push the paradigm of a pyramid, that suggests that there's someone at the top. So what would the shape be like? If we completely fix society, what would the shape of society be like? I almost feel like it should be a two-dimensional plane where it's one person thick. There's no one above you, there's no one below you within your plane of existence. For those of you who believe in essential consciousness, as I do, you can call it God, you can call it whatever. It would be the substrate and the superstructure that you're made out of, the particles that you're made out of, that creates this plane of existence, would be the ultimate controlling force. Because without its rules of engagement, we don't hold together. We have no form. But now, from our 60,000-foot view, when you look down from on high, you start to notice things that you've never seen before, right? Remember the first 1973 Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory? As soon as they got in the elevator and they flew around the town, which is sort of I believe the helicopter shots that open the movie, Charlie's able to look down on his village for the very first time, and he gets a perspective of his town that he's never seen before. And that happens to all of us once we get into the plane for the very first time and look out the window. Isn't it funny when you're young and you haven't flown much, you clamor to the window, and after you've flown a million times, you want the aisle so you get the fuck off the plane as fast as possible? I'm just going to let this one be rated naughty. But when we look down at the world, if we could look down on the world and really see the superstructures and the class structure, those who have been allowed to be educated and get smart, those who are still running around inside jungles, running inside rainforests. When you overlay happiness over that, you might be really surprised at who's thrilled to death to be alive and those who are in tumultuous perceptions of debt. I'm willing to bet that the South American jungle people are, double smiles, and your average banker that runs the world is kind of a droopy face, frown. But once you start seeing the world get compartmentalized, when you start to see those who have achieved the man behind the curtain, as it would be portrayed in The Wizard of Oz, you start to realize it's all perception. And it is made further possible, I believe, by these pendulum of belief systems, these doublespeak mechanisms. They've taught society to worship their demise, right? Christmas is very, very important for those that rule the world, trust me. And the reason why it's very important is it gets children strung out on fiction, materialism. It separates the arc of love from a parent to the arc of love for an object, an inanimate possession. If the parent does not capitulate and give the child a gift, the child starts to separate even further and faster from the parent. So consumerism, to keep corporations in the black, it has infected the relationship between you and your child, if you've let it, right? So think about these poor neighborhoods. These poor neighborhoods that don't have a lot of money to give gifts to their kids. Oh, we cry for them, right? Stevie Wonder in his song "I Wish," I think he said, sometimes we wouldn't get a present, but we were happy with the joy the day would bring. Sometimes we wouldn't get a thing, but we were happy with the joy the day would bring. And the thing is by him growing up broke and realizing that presents don't really have anything to do with love, he oriented himself better as a child. And he also kept himself out of the coma such that he could write very beautiful metaphorical lyrics for the rest of his life, because he never got stuck in the container. Now, religion for me is a very strange thing, because I have some wonderful friends who believe everything in Christianity, verbatim, and they're some of the best people I've ever met in my life. I mean, the most moral, tried and true, take the shirt off their back for you kind of folks, sacrifice everything so that you have what you need, right? But, and there have been people that have tried to do what I'm about to suggest, but no one's really been able to pull it off, which is a new belief system by which it's not cultish, it's not elitist, it isn't casting dispersions on other religions, but it offers a place for us to all go where we can live in the unknown, but still converse about a central consciousness. What I think is interesting about Facebook is that Facebook has a column in its database for spirituality, so your religion. And of course, there's everything under the sun under the selection box, the drop down. And there is a really cool one, which is, I think, just says spiritual or spirituality or something like that. It's very sort of, I believe in a consciousness. I don't know what it is, but that's what I believe. And it's nice. It's cool. But what I want you to understand is that there's a force on this planet that invests money and time into ensuring that your pendulum of belief is as extreme as possible, meaning it swings as far back to one side as it does swing to the other side, sort of like a swing set, right? Now, here's an analogy I want you to think of, because I think it's very applicable. You ever been stuck on a swing set? When you were a kid, your ass is in that horrible seat that's crushing your buns together, and someone's pushing you, and at first you wanted them to push you, You know, I always thought, just to digress for 60 seconds, I always thought swing sets were the most, one of the biggest letdowns on the playground. Because you sit on it and someone pushes you and it just isn't that interesting, right? You're just, I'm going up, I'm going down, I'm going back, I'm going up. It just really wasn't that interesting, was it? We like to bullshit ourselves that it is. Just like when we like to do straight shots of alcohol, we think it's so great, and then we drink it and we're like, what the hell were we thinking? I guess we're trying to impress other people, right? But if you've ever been stuck on a swing set, you'll know that feeling of being in a paradigm that's supposed to be entertaining, but you want off. And when you're really stuck on it, someone keeps pushing you, and you're moving so fast that to step off is going to potentially injure you deeply. And you're not sure how you're going to get injured. That's the interesting thing about it. Well, if you jump off at the high point, my God, you could be sailing, 10, 15 feet in the air, and then who knows what you're going to slam into. Depends on where the swing set is. Depends on how big you are. When you're only 3 feet tall and someone's swinging you 10 feet in the air and you hop off, well, you're going to fall several lengths of your body to the ground. If you get off on the downswing, you're going to face plant into that ground. You're going to knock your teeth out, poke your eye out, break a bone. So here's the thing. I think that if you have a very, very deep swing of your pendulum of belief, whereby you can believe that science put a man on the moon, but a couple thousand years ago, a dude's walking on water, bringing back people from the dead, as if God is some gigantic circus act, right? And that's the funny thing. God walked around and just kept healing and doing things as if he needed to. He didn't need to do any of that. All he needed to do was show up and die, according to the Bible, right? He just needed to show up and say, hey guys, stop killing lambs, stop doing all this old pagan crap. I'm going to die on this cross because for whatever reason you have original sin, and I'm going to fix you. But no, it was a huge dog and pony show for a while. All of the parables that Christ said were in Egyptian text, minimum 3,000 years before he was born. And that, no one claims that no one claims that any of his sermons were his idea. He just simply told them again and strung them together. And they're obviously extremely valuable algorithms of truth pushed into story form. But now let's just say that you could center your pendulum. You could slow it down. Perhaps it doesn't move much. Then what happens? You're on that swing. It's straight up and down as far as anyone from 10 feet can see. And you're sort of just kind of wobbling in the wind. You're taking in information. You can get off at any point in time because you're at no risk. You're not in some high velocity situation. Well, then what? Does life become boring that we didn't go to the moon and that a guy didn't walk on water? Is it really so much of a bad news story that these fanciful things didn't happen? For those of you who are parents, let me give you a question. Actually, let me put it to you a little bit deeper than that. If you believe we went to the moon, and you believe that Jesus walked on water, and I come up to you and I say, and I'm somehow anointed in your mind as being someone who knows the truth, then I say those things never happened. Either one of those things didn't happen. Doesn't mean there's not a God. Doesn't mean God didn't send that information down in a fictional story for you to hear in the form of sentences that infects your mind with truth. I don't think Christ, other than saying he was the Son of God and dying for your sins, take that out of the mix, right? Which that gives, right? Remember, that outsources salvation to pasty white pedophiles in Italy, right? Other than that, everything else he said was great. How to live your life, how to be good to each other. As far as the moon goes, well, it's still there. It's right up in the sky. If it is truly a heliocentric ball around our heliocentric ball, we'll get there at some point. But if you're a parent, especially a female, because you can't escape what I'm about to say usually if you're a female, and you watch your child enter this world, I mean, right there, especially if you're the dad and you're next to your wife, and here comes your child, You're telling me that you need fiction to make your life mean something? You need something fictional to make being a father or a mother mean something? You need something else? I don't think you do. Let me tell you something about beliefs here for a split second. There's a weird thing in humanity right now, and I'm sure it's existed since humanity kind of gained sentient consciousness, that we worry about not knowing things. I do. That's why I make this show. Well, that's why I made the other show, I should say, really. Trying to figure it out. Trying to put it into videos so you guys can comment on things, right? We want to know how to remain safe is pretty much the first rule of thought. That's why children clamor to tribes. That's why some adults never grow out of childhood, even though their bodies get old. If any of you have ever been in a situation where someone used you as a safety net, could be your child got scared at a scary movie, scary ride, something freaked them out. You're a guy and your woman got freaked out and she grabbed you. Somebody grabbed you to be secured. And usually guys don't have anybody to grab but ourselves, right? So if you've ever had that experience where you were accepted as the cornerstone of safety, you'll know what I'm about to say. That urgency and that desperation, when you see someone's eyes freak out, their eyes go wide, they're in full fight or flight, their left brain is clamoring for safety and reassurance. That moment is how a lot of people manage their belief systems. And in a situation of physical threat or perceived physical threat, you can understand it. You can make sense of that. Of course, they want to be safe. Something's gone horribly wrong. And when it comes to belief, it could be very, very dangerous because it's such an intellectual exercise of what you're putting in your brain, of what you're stuffing in the hole that you think needs to be filled, the void of unknown, because it's freaky to wake up with nothing like that. Like I've mentioned in the past, the third act of Altered States, where he got down to the void of creation and he said it was horrifying because there was no orientation, there was no sense of being, there was no purpose, and therefore no love. And when he came back to his living room, having to fight through the transformation, because what he had done is he'd sort of gotten to a point where he thought he wasn't going to be able to get back. Like he fought to go to the center of reverse engineering time, essentially. And when he got there, he thought he might have slipped. It's almost like when the diver goes down too far and the ocean pushes you down instead of up. That's where he felt like he was. He was struggling to get back to the surface of his life with his wife. And it saves their marriage in the end. It's kind of cool. Now, I'm going to say that when you're young, you may not have parents or guardians that are awake, and so you're going to have done that in your lifetime like most of us at some point. But as you gain consciousness, and as you claim to be an adult, and as you claim to be mature and intellectual is just a claim to say, well, I'm really looking at the facts now. I should say even just looking at the information and deciding what I think is fact and fiction. I'm applying cross-referencing techniques. I'm observing prediction models. So someone says this is true, and I watch it either happen or not happen, right? Al Gore's horse shit about climate change, right? Their models of predicting weather are failing miserably, and so they just keep genericizing their algorithms until they can take credit for everything going on planet Earth and claiming it's climate change, right? So we need to live in a much more secure world within ourselves, within our family. Children fear the unknown until you tell them there's nothing to fear in most cases. I'll give you a story. It happened in my life. It just occurred to me. It's just a weird little story, but it kind of drives home the point because it was like a fight or flight moment of uncertainty. This is like 25 years ago. My girlfriend and I went out to lunch. in Oxnard, California. And we got our food. I don't even remember where we were. I don't remember if we were taking it back with us or we already ate. But it was time to drive back to work because we worked together. And we hit one of the major streets, this gorgeous town right by the beach. And some guy, some punk kid in a car, some hot rod car, I think it was a Charger, like a 76 Charger. He had it completely souped up. And this guy was having a bad day. And he pulls out from some restaurant or something. He gets out in the middle of the road and he is driving fucking crazy. He's obviously angry. I think he hit the median between the two roads, which is obviously a low curby thing, but it, racked his car pretty good. He got mad that he did that, and then he started. This car must have had a massive engine in it because he's whipping this car in circles and driving it around, and he's angry. He's not having fun. He's not just, oh, here, watch me do some donuts and leave a bunch of marks and I'll leave and go home. And there was a point where his car was probably, 100 feet from us, maybe 200 feet from us, close enough that was like, holy shit, this guy could just decide to drive right into us. He just seemed like a maniac. And so our certainty of life and the ability to drive home had suddenly vanished because we had this crazy kid in front of us just driving so erratically that our brains could not put it together. We couldn't understand what's going on with him, right? You might, again, if a kid drove in front of us and did donuts and was losing control, you could at least say, he's having fun. He doesn't realize he's losing control and he's probably going to get himself hurt and other people getting hurt. This guy was random. And my girlfriend, who was several years older than me and from, New York City, she wasn't some pussycat. She melted. She had the steering wheel. She was driving. And she goes, what do I do? What do I do? Like, oh my God. And I could hear her almost crying. Like she was getting right up to that crying point of going, I don't know what to do. And all I said was just stop. Just stop the car. Let's just see where he goes. Because we can get out of the way a little bit if we don't go towards him anymore, right? And the nice thing is that the second she said that, the guy calmed down, drove his car away, turned around and drove his car away because he was aimed at us he was on the wrong side of the road, that kind of thing, in like the downtown or beach community area of Oxnard. Why tell that story? Well, life sometimes comes at us like that. We don't know what to do. Back in the 60s, you had a lot of kids getting drafted. You had in the 50s kids getting drafted, the 40s kids getting drafted. And here you have a kid who may or may not know what he wants to do or she wants to do with their life, and they get sucked into a war, and they didn't ask for that. It's a bank-on-bank profiteering campaign, romanticized as some big moral imperative of clashing paradigms of states and countries. But in the end, it's just two banks making money. The kid gets trained, deployed, and oh my God, nothing makes any sense anymore. Why are we shooting each other? Why is my buddy dead? So I want you to think about, in your mind, where do you have extremely contradicting standards in your own thought process? Where do you believe in magic, and where do you force yourself to believe in science? Now, the beautiful thing about some of you is that some of you are very, very good at being completely scientific, and you don't believe in the moon missions, and you don't believe in religion as dictated in its pure form of magic and all that stuff. Some of you will live completely in the spiritual realm. You have absolutely no opinion of the moon mission. You believe in your Lord and Savior, whoever that is, and you live a beautiful spiritual world, and perhaps you don't really engage all this nonsense in the world, because it's nonsense. Trust me. You know what's really strange is because of this concept of globalism as there's many different definitions of globalism. There's globalism that's like New World Order type fears. There's globalism that is made possible by jets that got executives to work between countries and boats that were able to ship product between countries. The boat markets go back, thousands of years, whereas the jets help us develop, big institutions. And the internet has sort of been the coup de grace of globalism. It shrunk the world. It made everyone else's problems your problems. And it's sort of sad. And because we engage reality on that level, they can pump fiction to us, or fact, and make us worry about it. And that sort of force in your life, because it is a force, it is an emotional, spiritual, atomic force. I'm mixing metaphors and sciences there, but you get what I'm saying, right? For instance, if you turn on your web browser and you go to your favorite news organization of your choice and you start hearing about something very traumatic that happened in Europe, all of a sudden it's your problem too. It's your problem too. You got to change your Facebook profile to have some commemorative overlay, because you're going to tell the world how much you care. Because you do on one level. But now think about if no one ever told you. Would your life have gone on? Would the feeling of utter negativity in your system and dread and fear have ever happened? Probably not, right? Talk to an oncologist who has a bit of a psychiatric background, and they'll tell you that those emotions catalyze a lack of health. It can catalyze electrical patterns in your body that can interrupt how the proteins communicate with DNA. They can interrupt how a cell multiplies. I was trying to think the other day, what if my entire life, my personal life, and you can apply this to you, right? Now, some of you have been unfortunate to be involved with some of this stuff through being a victim of it, one way or the other. But imagine that you never turned on a television and watched the news. You never picked up a newspaper and read about an event that happened outside of your circle of life, the town that you live in, the city that you live in, the country that you live in. That never happened. For instance, there hasn't been a 9/11 event in California. So if I had never opened up a newspaper, read anything, turned on a television, I would have no knowledge of that event because it didn't happen in my circle. I have never been able to truly participate in any of the recovery of those events personally. I didn't go to New York City. I didn't pick up dust and move things around. I didn't heal anyone. And think about all the stuff that's happened in Europe over this last 2 or 3 years with, military Sharia law people moving in claiming to be refugees. Think about how much you've been concerned about that if you're an American. And of course, we sell ourselves this bill of goods. And it could be true. It actually is true, I think, in a relative form. But I sort of have faith in the localized regions of the world. For instance, our thought is that if we hadn't moved in on Nazi Germany, that Hitler would have continued to build up power in Europe, and he would have been able to cross the seas, take over all of Russia, all the other countries in Eurasia, probably spread down into Africa, obviously take out Great Britain, and there'd be this really weird moment in time when we'd be staring off the coast of either New England or California, and here comes either a Japanese armada or a Nazi armada coming to take over America. And those are some of the stories that we sell ourselves. And, it has, Genghis Khan did it. He moved across all of Europe after conquering Eurasia. But I think that we've got a lot of mechanisms now to fight that sort of event. And what I'm saying is silly. But it's just to prove a point. If you went back and reanalyzed your entire life and said, what if you weren't informed about the entire world? How much would your life have changed? For the better or for the worse? Now, what are some of the benefits of that information? Well, obviously, fighting evil, tyranny, that kind of stuff. It's the mechanism by which that happens. Getting informed that one region of the world's going south, and we all need to chip in to get rid of that force. When 9/11 did happen, New York was devastated, And people from every state in this country, including foreign countries, came over to help clean up the mess. Now, I'll tell you, if you ever met a New Yorker, you have no worries that New York could have taken care of itself entirely. But obviously, we helped, not myself personally, but folks did help, and it sped up the process. I mentioned that analogy to give us a sense of orientation, because it's that orientation that decides what we need to do in life. How much do you need to believe one thing over another thing? Do you really need to believe in something that supposedly happened 2,000 years ago? Is it important you shove that down the brains of your children? Well, only if you subscribe to the notion that somehow, without doing anything wrong, your child was born with a sin that needed to be forgiven. Right? And there's this, Christianity is not the biggest religion on planet Earth, right? It must really look silly to all the other religions in the world that a Christian show up and say, you're all guilty. I know you're in the Philippines and you don't have Christianity, but you're all guilty. And somehow that's an appealing belief system. Isn't that weird? Show up to a Muslim nation and say, you need the Holy Bible. Why do I need this? Because you're all guilty. And we have the only outsourced authority to get you to God. And then the person goes, well, are you perfect? Oh, no. But I have been given authority by God to be the only person to get you to God. Well, can I do it myself? No, you can't. You don't have the authority to get to God. It's weird, right? The thing is that if you really want to tell yourself that you're in control of your own beliefs, if you're in control of your orientation in the universe, then you don't need paradigms of any kind, of the fictional kind, to give yourself that power, in my opinion. You don't need that. If there is a God, if there is a central consciousness, then if there's any equality between man, it is that you have access to the same information that the person who's claiming authority has. You do. And I believe that we are gifted with brains that can find it. You know, some of us get hit on the head and lose access to that channel, that clear channel. Some people get hit on the head and have the clearest channel on planet Earth. Some people do drugs and burn out their brains and lose access. Some people do certain types of drugs and gain absolute pipeline to the center of the universe. So we got to be careful about how we live our lives, for sure. It could be that this particular journey, someone has an injured vessel and they're unable to really have a clear access. Believe me, you'll come back. It won't matter anyway. Once you transcend to the other side, you're with the central consciousness immediately. Hopefully you feel me on this one. This one's a bit esoteric. How much do you swing in your belief systems? How much does life have to be a scientific schematic on a piece of paper? And how much can life, is life allowed to be better than a Hollywood movie in terms of fiction, but it is portrayed in your mind as reality? I was telling a good friend of mine the other day, because she believes the Bible, at least today, she believes it very literally. And I said, that's cool. Because her and I get along really well. And I said, look, it could be that we live in two different timelines, and that somehow those two different timelines are simply lines that converged at one point. And what triggered me to say this to her was that she's not the only person that's ever said it to me. There are humans that talk to me and they say, I know it's true. I know the Bible's true. I just know it. And there is no need for me to dispute that with them, to convince them otherwise. There's no need. If you have two lines that are infinitely long, which is our journey in this reality, whatever it is, and they're bent, they're on the same plane of existence, they're the same, 3D space, and they're not parallel. As long as they're not parallel, either the back of the timeline will converge or the front of the timeline will converge, right? Either you're going to converge with that line or you've already converged with that line. And after that, you're going to be infinitely, if you can't change your trajectory, you're going to infinitely not be together, right? Because you're going to grow apart. I tend to believe it's not straight lines. I believe the fact that man has been given choice gives way to the notion of being able to bend your line of belief whenever you want to. But I said to her, what if in your timeline the story of Christ is 100% true, for whatever reason, however that's possible? For you, it is a part of your past, and so when you look into the timeline of your life, tracing your line back, however curvy or straight it might be, that Jesus did exist in the way that you believe him to have been documented in the Holy Bible. But in my timeline, he is merely a typology of Titus Flavius, that some of the greatest minds of our timeline of humanity simply wrote down some beautiful messages, reiterating it from potentially over 20 previous religions into one beautiful story designed to save the Roman Empire, who was crumbling at the time from taxation, convince the people to tax themselves in the name of God, guilt-trip them into a paradigm of control known as Christianity, which was pounded into Europe through 800 years of inquisitions. But we have crossed paths. We've crossed paths, and now we're together. You exist in my timeline, and I exist in yours. But we have different timelines. When you look into your timeline, boom, it's true. You feel me, right? That could be it. That could be it. We could actually be experiencing Mandela effects simply because through the internet and through cross-referencing belief systems, we have perhaps a bunch of us in one timeline and a bunch of us in a slightly different timeline. My advice is to say, whatever's going to make the most stable society, the most tolerant society, is probably where we should try to fix our pendulum. It's never going to be still. It shouldn't be still. We should always evaluate what we think is the truth constantly, right? I think that's it. Probably made it to 1 hour. A lot of pauses in this one. I'm at an hour and 17 minutes on my end. If you dig the series, please subscribe. If you like this episode, please like. As always, your comments are always welcome and always enlightening. I appreciate all you guys. Hope you dig the series. Please keep your suggestions coming. The funny thing is I'm getting a lot of suggestions from folks that obviously haven't seen all the episodes. And the beautiful thing is we're all thinking the same thing, because I will tell you right now that 80% of the requests I've been getting lately for, have you thought about doing an episode on this or episode on that? I've already done the episode. The only reason why they can't find it is that I use different terms for the episode titles. So someone said, have you ever done an episode? You should do an episode on anxiety and the pharmaceutical industry. And I said, well, there's an episode called Calming Your Soul, another episode called Big Pharma. So if you think I haven't covered a subject, please send me a message, leave a comment. I won't link you, but I'll tell you exactly what episode title it is. Go to the channel, hit the search button. Boom, you'll have it. The reason why I don't always post the links is that I'm at a location where I'm using my phone to reply to you. And so I don't always have the time to search through all my videos, find the link, and cut and paste it. But there's a lot of stuff out there. Hundreds of hours of pontificating by yours truly. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for coming. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.